My name is Evelyn Merritt, and I turned 72 last spring. I still keep the same habits Thomas and I built together: supper at 6, dishes by 7, the porch light on before dark. Our brick colonial sits on a quiet street in Savannah, the kind of neighborhood where oak trees lean low and neighbors wave whether they know you or not. Thomas and I bought the house in 1968, back when one salary could still buy a future. He poured the foundation himself, and every brick holds his steadiness. Tonight, the dining room smells of roast chicken and rosemary. My daughter, Ava, and her husband, Drew, shuffle in with their phones still glowing. They've been living here temporarily since last February, 9 months that feel longer than pregnancy. I remind myself that they fell on hard times, that family helps family, that this is what Thomas would have wanted. We start with polite talk: the weather, Drew's job interviews, the price of eggs. Ava picks at the green beans. Her voice carries that restless energy she's had since she was 12, the kind that fills a room even when she's sitting still. "Mom," she says suddenly, "have you noticed how much houses in this neighborhood are selling for? The Hendersons got nearly 800,000. I nod, wary. "It's crazy." "Right," Drew adds. "You're sitting on a gold mine." The word "sitting" lands heavier than it should. I keep carving the chicken, pretending my hands aren't shaking. Ava pushes her plate away. "Look, I'm just saying, this house means nothing in the grand scheme. We could sell, split it, and all breathe for once." Her words slice through the steam rising from the gravy boat. "This house, I manage, is the reason you had a roof over your head when you lost your apartment. It's 30 years of memories," she interrupts, rolling her eyes. "Memories don't pay bills." "Mom?" The silence that follows feels like winter closing in. Even the clock above the mantel seems to hesitate between ticks. Drew clears his throat, mutters something about practicality, but the air has already gone cold. I can still hear the sound of Thomas hammering, the echo of a promise we built brick by brick, now turned into numbers on a spreadsheet. When the plates are cleared and Ava retreats upstairs, I sit alone at the table, staring at the faint outline of her fingerprints in the candle wax, wondering when survival started sounding so much like greed. The morning after that dinner, I woke before the sun. Same as always. Habit, not hunger, pushed me up. I dressed in my thick coat, found my old leather purse, and drove to the market while the streets were still washed in gray. Savannah mornings are soft that way. Quiet, almost forgiving. The aisles, though, were merciless. 2 turkeys, 20 pounds each, 10 pounds of potatoes, bags of cranberries, butter, rolls, wine. Every number felt heavier than the last. I counted again, whispering under my breath like a teacher doing sums on a blackboard. 35 mouths. 1 stove. The math didn't work, but I kept adding anyway. At the register, the cashier, young, kind eyes behind chipped blue polish, rang up the total and grinned. "Army coming over." "Something like that," I said. My smile didn't quite reach. She laughed softly. "You must be some cook." "Some cook." I handed her the card Thomas once carried in his wallet. The total blinked higher than my monthly pension check, but I signed anyway. It wasn't about the money. It was the expectation stitched into every dollar. By the time I carried the bags into the kitchen, my phone was already vibrating. Ava's messages stacked like marching orders. "Remember the gluten-free rolls? Make sure the gravy's light." Drew's cholesterol. "Oh, and start early this time." I leaned on the counter, breath short, watching the green dots of her messages appear and vanish. The kitchen timer clicked softly, an old metronome counting out the rhythm of my obedience. Last Christmas flashed back the dizziness when I stood too long, the brief moment when the room went white around the edges. I'd hidden it easily, lowering myself into a chair, pretending to check the oven temperature while the world steadied. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever did. Now, surrounded by bags and silence, I realized this wasn't family tradition anymore. It was choreography, me performing competence while everyone else applauded the result. I took out a notepad, wrote "Bake Pies Wednesday," and felt a strange chill behind the motion, as if I were preparing for someone else's holiday, not my own. By late afternoon, the house smelled of cinnamon and dish soap. I'd been scrubbing counters and sorting serving dishes, trying not to think about the weight of the grocery bags stacked in the pantry. The phone rang, an unfamiliar number from Atlanta, but I answered anyway. "Eve, it's June," came the soft, uncertain voice of my cousin. I hadn't heard it in months. "Well, my goodness," I said, setting the dishcloth aside. "I was just thinking of you the other day." We talked a little about the weather, about her new apartment after the divorce. Then her tone shifted. Hesitant. "I wanted to ask if you'll be hosting Christmas again this year." The question caught me off guard. "Yes, same as always." Why a silence bloomed between us. "Laura called last week," she said finally. "She told me not to make the trip. Said this year's guest list was smaller. She thought it might be awkward." With everything I've been through, I sank into a chair, gripping the phone tighter. "She said that she was kind about it," June rushed to add, but it still stung. "Your dinners were always the only place I felt like family." After we hung up, I sat staring at the lace tablecloth, tracing one corner between my fingers. My daughter had uninvited my cousin to keep appearances tidy, as if hardship were contagious. I remembered another Christmas long ago, when I was the one calling my own mother, crying over bills and exhaustion. She'd said, "You made your bed, Evelyn. Now lie in it." I'd promised myself I'd never let my child feel that kind of judgment. I'd tried so hard to be the opposite, always saying yes, always fixing what was broken. Now the pattern had simply changed hands. The house was quiet, except for the refrigerator's low hum. Midnight came before I noticed the clock. Standing by the sink, I whispered into the dark, "I've trained her to treat me this way." The words hung there like frost on glass, visible for a moment before fading back into silence. By the time the clock in the hallway struck midnight, the house had settled into the heavy quiet that only comes before Christmas morning. Ava and Drew were upstairs, their bedroom door closed, the faint hum of the television seeping through the floorboards. I stood alone in the kitchen, the oven preheating to 350, its orange light flickering against the tile. The counter looked like a battlefield, rows of ingredients lined up in military order: flour, sugar, nutmeg, pie shells thawing beside a stack of recipe cards, so worn the ink had bled into the paper. I'd been up since the day before, but my body refused to rest. The note on the counter stared back at me. "Still unfinished. Turkey goes in at 6. Remember Drew's allergy." I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop, telling myself I only meant to check the weather. My fingers moved on their own, typing Santa Fe flights. The name carried a softness that made my throat tighten. I'd dreamed of that desert city for years, ever since I saw Georgia O'Keeffe's brushstrokes in a museum, the way she turned bone and sky into something holy. A list of flights blinked on the screen, one departing at 6:15 a.m. from Savannah. One seat left. Price high enough to make me hesitate. I stared until the lines blurred. Then I clicked. Confirm. My heart beat so fast I could hear it over the ticking clock. I closed the laptop and exhaled for the first time in months on a scrap of notepaper. I wrote dinners in the fridge. Love. Mom. No apology. No explanation. The fog had rolled in by the time I backed the car out of the driveway. The world looked half-formed, ghostly. I didn't pack much, just a small suitcase, a coat, and the bracelet Thomas gave me the year we built this house. The tires hissed against the wet road as the streetlights disappeared behind me. Somewhere ahead, in the direction of the airport, the dark was breaking into the faintest trace of dawn. The airport shimmered under harsh fluorescent light, too bright for the hour, too clean for what I felt inside. The automatic doors sighed open, and the smell of brewed coffee and jet fuel greeted me like a promise. My suitcase wheels clicked over the tile soft, steady, certain. At the counter, the gate agent smiled. The kind of practiced kindness you learn from years of seeing people leave. Going somewhere warm for Christmas, she asked, scanning my ticket. Somewhere fair, I said before I could stop myself. The words hung there, surprising even me. She nodded, as if she understood exactly what I meant. I found a seat near gate B12, where the early flyers gathered in quiet anticipation, families with too many carry-ons, couples sharing earbuds, a man asleep with a newspaper folded against his chest. My phone buzzed in my bag once, then twice. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I turned it off before the screen could light with Laura's name. The loudspeaker crackled final boarding call for Flight 227 to Albuquerque. Connecting to Santa Fe, my pulse quickened. I hadn't done something impulsive in years. I hadn't done something for me in even longer. As I handed over my boarding pass, a fragment of memory drifted up Thomas. Standing in our old kitchen, his hands dusted with flour. "You can't pour from an empty cup, Eve," he'd said once. After I'd worked myself sick, trying to host another perfect Christmas. I hadn't understood him then. I think I do now. The plane shuddered as it began to taxi. Outside, dawn broke gently over the Savannah River, turning the water into a ribbon of rose and gold. The city grew smaller beneath us until it vanished entirely. I pressed my forehead to the window and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Thomas." Somewhere between the clouds and the rising sun, I realized I was finally breathing again. Laura woke to silence. The kind that didn't belong in her mother's house. No clatter of pans, no hum of the oven, no smell of coffee or cinnamon rolls creeping up the stairs. She sat up, blinking against the pale light slipping through the curtains. For a fleeting second, she thought maybe her mother had overslept. Then she saw the clock, 7:45 a.m. on Christmas morning. That was unthinkable. She padded downstairs. Her robe pulled tight around her. The kitchen looked untouched, still and wrong. The oven was cold. The counters bare except for a single folded note. She read it twice before she could process the words. "Dinner's in the fridge. Love. Mom." The handwriting was steady, deliberate, the same script that had once written her permission slips and birthday cards. Laura's stomach dropped. By 10 o'clock, she had called 3 caterers, 2 restaurants, and a bakery. All were polite, all apologetic, all fully booked. "It's Christmas Day, ma'am," one woman said gently. "Even our dishwashers are home with their families." By noon, the doorbell began to ring. Aunt Claire with her candied yams. Uncle Benny carrying gifts. Drew tried to stall them with drinks, but questions started before coats were off. "Where's Evelyn? Why isn't the turkey in the oven?" Laura forced a smile so tight it ached. She had to step out. Soon the kitchen was chaos. Relatives argued about thawing times, bickered over seasoning, and stared helplessly at the 2 raw turkeys still in their wrappers. The refrigerator door hung open, spilling out half-prepared dishes and evidence of her mother's abandoned plan. In the doorway, Mr. Davis from next door watched quietly. He'd known Evelyn since the days she planted her first azalea bush. "Your mama cooked alone every year," he said softly. "Maybe it's your turn." Laura froze, wooden spoon in hand, as the room around her buzzed with confusion for the first time. She saw not the feast that hadn't happened, but the years that had, the hands that had chopped, stirred, cleaned, and never complained. She sank into a chair, the noise around her blurring into silence, and whispered, "What did I do?" The sun had already begun to dip behind the low adobe rooftops when my phone started to buzz across the patio table. I let it ring once, twice, before picking it up. The name on the screen tightened something in my chest. Laura? Mom. Her voice cracked through the line, brittle and thin. "Where are you?" "Everyone's here, Aunt Claire. Uncle Benny. The Davises, no one knows what to do." I watched the pink light soften over the terracotta walls, the air carrying that dry, clean scent I'd always imagined when I'd thought of Santa Fe. "I'm safe," I said quietly. "And I imagine you're learning how much it takes to do what I did every year. You just left." The anger in her voice flickered beneath the panic. "You didn't even warn me." "I didn't think I needed to," I said, tracing the rim of my teacup. 35 guests, 1 cook, 0 help. Do you hear how those numbers sound when spoken out loud? There was silence on the other end, then a shaky breath. I just wanted everything to look perfect. Drew's parents were coming. I wanted them to see I could host like you always did. The admission softened something in me, but not enough to undo the ache. "Laura," I said, "you can't build love on someone else's exhaustion. All that perfection you wanted, it came at a cost." "I didn't mean I know," I said gently, but meaning well doesn't change what it took from me. The only sounds were distant laughter from a nearby courtyard and the hum of wind through the pines. "I'm sorry," she whispered at last. "I didn't see it. I think that's the truth of it." I replied, "You never saw." She said something else, something half-formed between apology and plea, but I couldn't bear to hear it. I ended the call, set the phone down, and stared out over the city's fading light. For the first time in years, I felt no need to explain, no rush to fix what was broken. I simply let the quiet hold me, and it didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. A week had passed since the call, though time in Santa Fe felt different, slow, golden, patient. Each morning, sunlight spilled across the adobe walls of my hotel room, warming the terracotta floors before I even rose. I spent my days wandering through narrow streets where chili ristras hung like garlands, and the air smelled faintly of sage. Strangers greeted me with a softness that made me ache. "Good morning, ma'am," they said, as if kindness were the most natural language in the world. At the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, I stood before a canvas of pale desert bones against an endless blue sky. There was no noise, no clutter, just space. For the first time in years, I understood what stillness could mean. On my way out, I stopped at a small jewelry stall near the plaza, among the silver and turquoise pieces. One bracelet caught my eye, simple, with a single carved feather. I bought it without hesitation, the first thing I'd purchased just for myself since Thomas died. Back home, Laura sat at our old kitchen table, the same one that had carried 30 Christmas dinners. A half-written letter rested beside her, creased, tear-stained, unsent. "I'm sorry for mistaking your effort for ease. It began. I see it now." She wiped her hands on a dish towel and returned to the stove, where a small pot of stew simmered unevenly. It was her first attempt at cooking alone. The carrots were too soft, the broth too thin, and the kitchen too quiet. Yet, in the silence, she felt her mother's absence like a mirror showing not abandonment, but reflection in Santa Fe. I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist and watched it catch the afternoon light. The silver felt cool against my skin, steady and alive. somewhere across the country. A daughter stirred a pot and tasted humility for the first time, while her mother learned how peace could taste warm, quiet, earned. The December light in Savannah was soft that morning, washing the neighborhood in pale gold. My house, once crowded and frantic, felt calm again, quiet, but not lonely. The air smelled faintly of cloves and fresh bread. I set the table with 8 plates. Not 35. 8 names written on small cards, each one belonging to someone who wanted to be here, not just to be seen. At 9:30, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, Laura stood on the porch, her hair pulled back, cheeks flushed from the cold. She held a grocery bag in one arm and a bunch of rosemary in the other. "Thought we'd need extra herbs," she said, smiling a little too quickly. "Come in," I replied. My voice came out softer than I expected. She stepped inside, hesitated for a moment, then reached to hug me. It wasn't long or dramatic, just steady, like something repaired rather than replaced. We started cooking side by side, moving around each other with quiet care. No commands, no lists, just rhythm. She asked where I kept the mixing bowls. I asked if she wanted to lead the stuffing this year. We laughed when she dropped an egg, both of us startled by how easy it was to laugh together again. The guests, neighbors, 2 cousins, and an old friend of Thomas's arrived early afternoon. No one mentioned last year. They brought pies, salads, wine. The house filled with low conversation and clinking silverware. Not performance, just comfort. At the table, I caught Laura glancing at my wrist. The silver bracelet gleamed faintly in the candlelight. She smiled. Recognition soft in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had changed when we bowed our heads before eating. She reached for my hand. Her palm was warm, her fingers firm. Dinner stretched long into the evening. The food wasn't perfect, but it was honest, like us. When the last dish was washed and the guests had gone, Laura leaned against the counter, hair loose, eyes tired but content. "I never realized," she whispered. "I know," I said. "Now you do." The house glowed with quiet light, and for the first time it felt full without feeling heavy. The last of the laughter had faded into the December night. Only the soft ticking of the mantel clock and the faint hum of the dishwasher filled the house. I sat by the fire with a cup of chamomile tea, the silver bracelet cool against my wrist. The room still smelled of roasted herbs and cinnamon, a gentler kind of Christmas. On the coffee table lay a yellowed sheet of paper, the guest list from last year. 35 names in Laura's tidy handwriting, each one a demand I had once mistaken for love. I smoothed it flat, studying it like a relic from another life. Then, without ceremony, I tore it in half. The paper split cleanly, the sound sharp in the quiet. I tore it again, and again, until all that remained were fragments small enough to fit in my palm. I leaned forward and let them fall into the fireplace. The scraps curled, blackened, and turned to ash within seconds. Watching them disappear, I felt something loosen in my chest, a weight I hadn't realized I'd carried for years. Laura appeared in the doorway, her hair pulled into a loose braid, a dish towel slung over her shoulder. "I almost forgot," she said, holding a small, wrapped package. "For you?" Inside was a framed photograph, just the 2 of us, flour on our hands. Mid-laughter over the mixing bowl from earlier that afternoon, someone had snapped it without us noticing. The moment felt real, unposed, like proof that love could look like partnership instead of penance. "It's perfect," I said, and meant it. Later, I opened my journal, the same one where I used to plan menus and grocery lists, and wrote a single line this year. The only thing I served was respect, and it was enough. Outside, the bells from St. John's Cathedral began to chime midnight. I stepped onto the porch, the cold air brushing my face, and looked toward the dark horizon. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard laughter carried on the wind, not demanding, not desperate, just light. For the first time, Christmas felt like peace,